we see a decrease in oxygen saturation, heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate? We didn't see any of that. I don't see any of that in the record.
Okay.
So I think that's a false allegation that was an overdose.
And doctor, when we use a medication like this, a titratable medication, is it something that is watched and I guess measured or considered by the clinicians who are following the patient?
Yes, both by the nurse and the nurse reporting to the physician and the physician during his or her rounds. So yes, a patient in the ICU would be attached to telemetry, and there would be lots of data collected, including all these really important vital signs that I mentioned before.
Okay. And these, if there is, say, blood pressure decreasing or heart rate decreasing, are there agents that can be applied routinely in order to address those while at the same time obtaining the beneficial effect of the medication?
There are medications like atropine or epi to counteract maybe some of the subtle changes in the physiology. Not quite my area because I don't treat patients, as you know, but there are medications that can be administered, pressors, for example, to increase blood pressure.
And in your experience, are those medications sometimes used in conjunction with a medication, an anti-anxiety medication like Precedex, in order to help keep a balance while still obtaining the therapeutic effects of the Precedex?
Yes, I think the important term here is the balance, the physiological balance that's necessary.
Okay. And is that unusual for that to happen in a case with a titratable medication, an anti-anxiety medication like Precedex?
No, I've seen it before in medical records.
Okay. Doctor, in the case of, say, the use of atropine or norepinephrine in order to address some of these issues with the use of Precedex, is that at all unusual in an ICU setting with these types of medications?
I don't believe so.
Okay. The use of medications like that, would that necessarily connote to you that an overdose of some sort had occurred?
No.
Okay. When we're looking at that, doctor, I guess I want to make sure I'm understanding, because on the very first date, the nurse who titrated down from 1.0 to 0.7 left it at 0.7, but now we're at 0.8 and 0.9. Those are higher numbers. Does that not mean that that's necessarily an overdose? It's now at a higher number than it was originally.
No, it's not indicative of an overdose. These are subtle changes in the amount of drug that is administered.
Okay. A little bit about something called a package insert. Are you familiar with what a package insert is?
I'm very familiar, yes.
What, if you could explain for the jury, what is a package insert and what purpose does it serve?
Package insert is something that is packaged with the medication. It's sort of like a layman's SOP for that medication. Of course, physicians should be aware of what's in the package insert. Some people in the jury may be familiar with the old PDR, physician's desk reference, which was made up of package inserts, thousands of them. It's no longer available, only online. So the package insert is just a brief introduction, typically 10, 20 pages long, that provides basic pharmacologic, toxicologic, dosing, metabolism information, and others about the medication.
Yeah. In your experience, doctor, is the use of a medication like Precedex in a clinical setting typically strictly limited to what is set forth in the package insert for that medication?
No, never. And that's true for any package insert. Package inserts are guidance, but it's not obligatory to fall within the criterion of a package insert. Okay.
For example, doctor, there was a document that was marked earlier in the case. It was the package insert for Precedex. And it indicates, for example, that Precedex is typically or should be administered by continuous intravenous infusion for a period not to exceed 24 hours, something like that. In your professional experience as a toxicologist, is Precedex routinely utilized in practice, for example, through continuous intravenous infusions? Says not to do that.
So if you look at the package insert, I don't have it with me here. It's dated, I think, 2014. So when a package insert is published, that's current knowledge. But then there may be many off-label uses of a medication, like using it for more than 24 hours, that has been explored and described and published in the literature and then adopted as best practice. So package inserts are not revised on a regular basis. These are just what is known about the drug, typically when it is published and approved for use.
Particular case where Precedex is administered as a continuous intravenous infusion for a period of greater 24 hours, is it your opinion that such a continuous infusion is permissible and safe in Grace Schara's case, for example?
In my opinion, yes. There are other alternatives, but some alternatives would require intubation, like propofol.
If you were to rely solely upon the contents of a package insert for a given medication, would you have accurate and current information on the way that medication is actually being utilized safely and effectively in a clinical situation?
Can you ask that again?
Certainly. If you were forced to rely upon nothing but the contents of a package insert for a given medication, would you have accurate and current information on the way that medication is actually capable of being utilized safely and effective in a clinical setting?
No, like I mentioned, the package insert is published and then there's additional off-label work done with the medication and you end up over here with new best practices. So you often don't and often can't rely only or solely on that package insert. You have to go to what is the current best practice, which is an adaptation of what's in a package insert.
Okay. And would you expect that a clinician or an MD who is skilled in or experienced in utilizing that medication would be up to date on that usage of that medication?
If that's their area.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about lorazepam. Are you familiar with a medication known as lorazepam?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and how are you familiar with that medication?
In the laboratory at the University of Florida, we made thousands of identifications of lorazepams and decedents. It's a commonly prescribed drug to take at home, and it's also a commonly administered drug in the emergency department, in the hospital, the clinic, and the ICU.
Okay. What is lorazepam typically used for?
It's a benzodiazepine drug, not a very potent one. It's kind of medium in terms of its potency. There's some that are more potent and some that are less potent. But it's also an anxiolytic drug. It's used to treat anxiety, and it's a non-opioid sedative drug as well. So it makes you sleepy.
Okay. Is there a typical dosage of lorazepam?
Well, just like Precedex, you have to pick the optimum dose, but in the hospital IV, it's typically starting at 0.5 milligrams.
Okay.
But the dose can be much higher.
Okay. Is lorazepam a medication that's commonly utilized in an ICU, to your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Inspector, I'm handing you what we've marked previously as exhibit number 26. Please note what this is.
Yes, this is a medication administration record for lorazepam.
Your Honor, may I publish to the jury? Okay, Matt, can you put that up there? Okay. What was the dose of lorazepam that was ordered for Grace Schara in this case?
0.5 milligrams.
It looks like the order was entered or started by a Dr. Backup on October 7th, according to this order?
Yes.
Okay. What's the frequency of the dose that's given here?
Well, on the 7th and the 8th, it was administered once. On the 13th, it was administered 3 times.
Okay, and you see up there, it says PRN Q6H. Do you know what that means?
As needed every 6 hours.
Okay. Now, the dosage here, 0.5 milligrams of lorazepam, is that a small dose, or can you characterize the size of that dose?
Very typical small dose of lorazepam.
Okay, and then how about the frequency in terms of PRN Q6 hours? Is that fairly typical?
It's fairly typical. It's not very frequent. It could be administered more frequently.
Frequently, can it be administered?
I'd say every 4 hours.
Okay, so this is in fact a period of time longer than that, 6 hours rather than 4.
Yes.
And that would be a more conservative frequency.
The 6 hours is
Yes.
more conservative.
Okay. In your training and experience as a forensic toxicologist, is lorazepam safe to be used in conjunction with Precedex?
Yes.
Okay, why is that? Can you explain?
It's been shown that these 2 drugs can be administered together. And it's very typical to give multiple central nervous system acting drugs to a patient in the ICU.
Okay.
It's nothing unusual.
We've heard some testimony from plaintiff's pulmonologist, Dr. Burdine, that lorazepam can have what's called a synergistic effect when used in conjunction with Precedex. Are you familiar with the term synergistic effect?
Yes.
Okay. What is meant by the phrase synergistic effect?
Synergistic means that there is an enhanced effect. So rather than additive, which would be 1 + 1 is 2, you have like 1 + 1 is 4 or 5.
You in agreement, doctor, that lorazepam has a synergistic effect in relation to Precedex?
Potentially, but in a medical legal matter, to say something is synergistic is really speculative because there's really no way to quantify that. We know it's at least additive, so you have the effect of the Precedex and you have the effect of the lorazepam. But to say the effect was enhanced is speculation.
Okay. Now, in this particular case, we see that 0.5 milligram doses of lorazepam were administered on October 13th, one at 11:25 a.m. and then again at 5:46 and 5:49. At the same time, Grace was on an infusion of Precedex at a titration level of 1.4 by the 13th. As a toxicologist, does the administration to Grace Schara of these 3 single doses of lorazepam while Precedex is simultaneously infusing at a rate of 1.4 cause you any concern?
No, and keep in mind that the first dose on the 13th was at 11:25, and the second and third dose were administered roughly 6 hours later. So no, not at all. And Grace was having medical issues at that point. So she was having rapid breathing, for example. And it was important to calm her down so she was more comfortable and she could be treated appropriately.
Okay. And why is that not concerning to you that these medications were used together in the dosages and frequencies that we've seen here?
These are small doses. So 0.5, even 0.5 times 2 at about 1,700 is, in my opinion, not a problem. These are small, appropriate doses administered to Grace, who was in crisis.
Are these doses of medications or these combinations something that you saw? Did you see overdoses in your practice as head of the toxicology lab with this type of dose and these types of medications?
I've seen a limited number of lorazepam overdoses. It is a drug, as I said before, it's widely prescribed. It's often used in the hospital, but it's often not associated with drug intoxication because it is a safe drug.
0.5 milligrams, that is not a dosage you would expect to see to cause an overdose.
Yes.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about morphine if we could. Are you familiar with the medication morphine?
Yes.
How are you familiar with that medication?
My doctoral work involved the analysis of heroin and its metabolites, including morphine, in decedents. So my lifetime work has really been devoted to opioids like morphine. I've written chapters on the use of morphine therapeutically as well as overdoses involving morphine.
What is, if you could explain to the jury, what is morphine?
Morphine is an opiate. It's derived from the poppy plant. It has analgesic effect. It's also a sedative medication.
Okay. Doctor, if I may, or Your Honor, may I approach the doctor?
You may.
Thank you.
Doctor, I'm handing you a copy of what we previously marked as exhibit number 31. You recognize that now?
Yes, this is the MAR for morphine.
Your Honor, may I publish this exhibit?
You may.
Doctor, we see exhibit number 31 on the screen. It looks like according to 31, a single 2 milligram dose of morphine was administered to Grace on the evening of October 13th at about 18-15 hours.
Yes.
How would you characterize the size or potency of a 2 milligram dose of morphine?
Again, a very typical dose of morphine, in this case, as a sedative, as a medication to reduce Grace's anxiety.
Okay. Would it have a potential effect to reduce her heart rate if it were elevated? Is that something this medication can do?
It can. In an overdose involving morphine, you would see a significant decrease in respiratory rate, the heart rate, the blood pressure, as well as the oxygen saturation.
Now, based upon your experience, knowledge, and training as a forensic toxicologist, would this amount of morphine, 2 milligrams, be sufficient, in your opinion, to cause an overdose likely to cause death in a patient like Grace?
No,
Why not?
it's too small. Just like the lorazepam or Ativan, it's too small. It's not a dose of drug that's going to result in an overdose.
Okay. You would not expect to see an overdose, for example, in a case that you consulted upon a patient who was given 2 milligrams of morphine.
No, I've worked cases where we know drivers of motor vehicles involved in crashes or decedents were given 2 milligrams or even 5 milligrams of morphine before their death or before their blood draw if they're alive. And we don't find morphine in the blood at all. It's a small dose.
Doctor, in accord with your knowledge and experience as a forensic toxicologist, can these 3 medications that we've talked about, Precedex or dexmedetomidine, lorazepam, and morphine, be utilized safely in combination with one another?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any reason why? What, based upon your experience, are you of the understanding or the experience that you can use these medications together?
Yes, that's my understanding. And of course, these medications weren't selected randomly prior to the administration to Grace. They were ordered and administered to Grace because of her rapid respiratory rate and her anxiety.
Are these 3 medications, in your experience, typically used in combination in an ICU setting?
Yes.
Okay. Would that, if a doctor from an ICU were to consult with you as a forensic toxicologist about the use of these 3 medications in concert in the dosages and the frequencies given in this case, would that raise any concerns for you?
None at all.
Okay. To put a finer point on it, doctor, if you were approached in this particular case by a physician who was wondering, should I give these medications to Grace in these dosages and with these frequencies in order to treat the clinical situation that I'm seeing, would you have had any issues with that, or would you have warned not to do that?
I have no issues.
Precedex was titrated to a level of 1.4 by the morning of October 13th. Single 0.5 milligram doses of lorazepam were administered on October 13th at 11:25, and then again at 17:46 and 17:49 hours. And finally, a single 2 milligram dose of morphine was administered at 18:15 hours on the 13th. Given these three medications and those specified doses of those medications and the timing of the administration of those medications, would you have any concern whatsoever for a fatal overdose of these medications in a patient like Grace?
No, I have no concern.
Okay, why is that?
Well, something we haven't really quite talked about yet today is when we look at an allegation of overdose, we also need to look at context.
Okay, can you explain?
Sure. So as a forensic toxicologist, best practices involve, of course, evaluating the data, everything that we can glean from the records, but also look and see if there is an exact association between the drugs in this matter and an adverse effect. We know these are central nervous system depressant drugs. They depress our CNS. So the effects, if it was an overdose, as alleged, you would see a decrease in the respiratory rate. That would be accompanied by a decrease in oxygen saturation. You may see a decrease in the heart rate as well. And you see a decrease in the blood pressure. In my contextual analysis of the facts in this matter, which includes the three drugs, plus an assessment of the vital signs, I don't see a direct relationship.
Doctor, there's been some testimony about the potential for resuscitation or reversal drugs in this case. Given the dosages and timing of the administration of these medications, and knowing that morphine was the last medication of the three to be administered at 18:15 hours, at what point in time would you expect to see clinical signs of an overdose if such were occurring as a result of that morphine administration?
So it's that cause and effect relationship that I spoke about, but also the context as well. So these drugs were administered IV, intravenously, and the drugs reach the brain very quickly, and that's where their site of action is. So you would expect there to be some sort of an impact of these drugs on the vital signs, like heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, and oxygen saturation.
Okay. Now, at the time of death indicated on Grace Schara's death certificate, it's noted that she passed at 19:27 hours on the 13th, or approximately 1 hour and 12 minutes after that single 2 milligram dose of morphine was administered. Would the passage of a period of time equivalent to 1 hour and 12 minutes between the time of administration of a 2 milligram dose of morphine to the time of death be consistent with what you would expect to see in a case of a fatal overdose caused by the administration of morphine?
No, we use this term in toxicology called acute intoxication. Acute meaning directly related to or proximate, as well as in time, short. So an hour and 12 minutes, I think you said, is not short.
Okay.
So it's not consistent with acute intoxication or acute overdose.
Okay. Would the fact that the patient had also received those 3 small doses of lorazepam and was also receiving Precedex up until the time it was turned off. Would that change your opinion?
No, but my opinion is really based on the 2 doses of lorazepam that were approximate to her passing. The other one was 6 hours or so before. I don't think that counts at all.
Okay, that's a good point, doctor. The one that was administered right around 11:30 or so in the morning would not be a consideration for you in terms of the additive effect of these medications?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and why would that be?
It's already been metabolized. It's been dealt with by the body, so it no longer has an effect.
Okay, so we're really just talking about the 2 dosages of lorazepam and then the small final dose of morphine when we talk about the potential for an overdose here.
Yes.
Okay. And of course, with the Precedex running, that doesn't change your opinion either. The fact that Precedex was also being administered.
It does not change my opinion.
Your Honor?
I'm handing you what we've marked as exhibit 443 and 444. Have you seen those documents before, Doctor?
Yes.
And do these documents show some vital signs for Grace at a point in time after permission to publish 443? Yeah. Okay. Doctor, when we look at the respiratory rates, for example, on this document, are the respiratory rates we see in this exhibit consistent with what you would expect to see during this time frame after the administration of that 2 milligram dose of morphine, if Grace were indeed experiencing a fatal overdose of Precedex in combination with lorazepam and morphine?
No, as a matter of fact, her respiratory rate is too rapid.
Okay. If you could, no, right behind you, there's like a stick right there. Do you see it against the wall there?
Yes.
Now, right above you is a blow up of this document. Do you see RR or respiratory rate there?
Can you focus this document or is it?
Can we blow that up and make that a little, or focus the respiratory rate? Okay. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the respiratory rate. So the breath per minute after the milligrams of morphine. And the rate of respiration is 36 for this time frame.
What is a normal respiration rate?
12, 15.
Okay, so at a point, and if we can look at that, what are the times when we're seeing these various respiration rates? It looks like
18, 25, 30, every 5 minutes.
okay, and 1825 would be approximately 10 minutes after the administration of the morphine. Okay. Doctor, we're seeing, from what I can tell, respiratory rates in the mid-30s consistently for, it looks like 40 minutes after the administration of that morphine. Would you agree that's what we're seeing here?
Yes, there's a second page as well.
Okay, and we will certainly talk about that, but why are those respiratory
Rate to be reduced if there was an overdose of the 3 medications.
would you expect it to be reduced to below a level that would be considered normal?
Possibly.
Okay. And in fact, these respiratory rates that we're seeing here they look to be nearly twice what the normal rate would be. Any other vital signs on here that you believe would be inconsistent with what's alleged to be an overdose?
We have heart rate.
Okay, what would you expect to see in terms of a heart rate with a fatal overdose of these medications?
A low heart rate.
Okay. Okay, and once again, we're looking at the same. This goes all the way up to about 40 minutes after the administration of the morphine. Okay, and you had earlier told us that, as I understand it, you would expect to see a concerning drop in these types of vital signs within 5 minutes of the administration of that morphine dose, if indeed they were going to be concern for an overdose. Okay, so these vital signs we're seeing here are not consistent with what you would expect to see for a fatal overdose.
Yes.
Okay, if we could, permission to publish Exhibit 444.
Does the clerk have your hard copy of 444?
Yes. Okay, do we have 444 up there? Okay. We have 444. It looks like it's a very similar document to 443. It's showing some more vital signs, but these pick up where the other ones left off at 1900 hours, 1905, et cetera, all the way up to 1925. Okay. And then again, when we look at the respiratory rates now at 1900, they're still in the mid 30s. And they do slowly decrease as we go along. But even by the time we get to the very end, it looks like a respiratory rate of 14. That's still within a normal range for respiratory rate, is it not? Okay. And then it looks like once again up, you say the heart rate is what you were looking at as well?
Upline.
Okay. And the heart rate all the way up until 1920 there is still, do you see any issues there or any concerns that would cause you concern for the overdose or a fatal overdose? Okay. Okay. And you would not expect any type of concern, for example, telemetry alarms or anything to be when an overdose occurs, you can sit down, doctor. I think we're done with those. When an overdose were to occur with, say, the administration of morphine, what happens? Does the breathing eventually stop? Does it suppress the breathing to the point where you're no longer breathing?
In the end, there's loss of vital function. So you see loss of heart rate, blood pressure, and respiratory rate.
And you would expect to see the loss of these things in quick succession to the point in time when the medication is administered?
Yes,
Okay, again, 5 minutes?
I'd say proximate, close to the time of the administration of the lorazepam and the morphine.
Okay, certainly a period of an hour passing after the administration of the morphine would be absolutely inconsistent with an overdose of these medications.
Yes.
Okay. We've heard some testimony from Dr. Burdine, plaintiff's pulmonologist, that resuscitation with some sort of opioid reversal agent might have been administered to Grace at or around the time of her arrest on the evening of October 13th, and that Grace may have survived had she received such an agent. Are you familiar with the term reversal agent?
Yes.
Okay, what does that mean?
Technically, we call it an antagonist, and we have an antagonist for morphine, which is called Narcan, and we have an antagonist for lorazepam, which is called flumenazole.
Antagonist for Precedex?
There is not.
Okay. Now, based upon your knowledge, education, training, and experience in the field of forensic toxicology, do you hold an opinion as to whether any reversal agent, if administered to Grace Schara at the time of her arrest on the evening of October 13th, would reasonably have had any effect?
No, in hindsight, no. These are small doses of drug that would not require the administration of a reversal agent.
Okay. Is there any particular reason?
I wouldn't expect someone to be in trouble after a few doses of Ativan. Also, I'd not expect someone to be in trouble with a 2 milligram dose of morphine.
Okay.
So
You ever experienced or seen an antagonist administered to an individual for the purpose of reversing a drug or 2 milligram dose of morphine in combination with a 0.5 milligram dose or 2.5 milligram dose of lorazepam?
well, often we don't know exactly what the dose is. I've seen these medications used, and they're very effective, but these are cases where someone is literally overdosed and their vital signs are not within normal limits.
Mhm.
And without the administration of a reversal agent, they would be deceased.
Okay. That's not the case. You don't see that here. Okay. Doctor, in your report, you offer 3 particular opinions in this case. I'd like you to just, we'll go through them. We'll just read them and I'll have you explain exactly to recap your opinions here, doctor. What is your first opinion as set forth in the first bullet point in your report?
Based on the medication administration record, the dose and frequency of the administration of dexmedetomidine, lorazepam, and morphine to Grace was appropriate. Lorazepam and morphine were administered in an attempt to modulate Grace's agitation and rate of respiration, and were vital clinical measures in her treatment in the ICU.
Okay. Are you able to explain or elaborate upon that opinion? Why do you come to that opinion?
Yep, we talked about that today regarding the appropriateness of these 3 medications in the treatment of Grace's level of agitation as well as her respiratory rate. This combination of drug is completely appropriate.
Okay. What is the second opinion that you have offered in your report?
The doses of medication are not consistent with the plaintiff's allegation of overdosage with sedatives. The co-administration of dexmedetomidine, lorazepam, and morphine in the intensive care unit is routine and appropriate and does not constitute a lethal cocktail of sedative medications.
Okay. And would you be able to explain for the jury or explain why you hold that opinion?
Basis for that, as I talked about earlier today, is that the doses are appropriate and the use of the medications were appropriate.
Okay. And what is the third opinion you have set forth in your report, doctor?
The administration of dexmedetomidine, lorazepam, and morphine to Grace did not contribute to or cause her death. There are no data in the medical records to support the plaintiff's allegation of overdosage. The medications and dose administered to Grace is for an overdose. That includes the drugs, the dosages, the appropriateness of the use of the drugs, as well as the lack of context in regards to an overdose. In other words, there's no data to support an overdose.
And are these opinions based upon your decades of experience working hands-on, consulting with medical professionals and district attorneys and governmental agencies on the subject of medications, medication administration, and medication interaction?
Yes.
Dr. Goldberger, are the opinions that you've expressed here today expressed within the accepted standards of toxicology to a reasonable degree of toxicological probability?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing further, doctor.
No questions, Your Honor.
Thanks, Judge. Dr. Goldberger. Seems to me from a review of your report,
If I may, sorry. He may need access to. Switch over. I'll get you set up.
Computer set up and also the microphone.
yeah. Right.
We have set up. Go ahead, Mr. Administrator, if you're ready.
Thank you. Now, we met over Zoom a few months back, right?
Yes, we did.
Remember?
Yes,
I took your deposition and you were in Kanab, Utah, right?
yes.
On your horse ranch. in the
Donkey ranch.
Southern part of Utah. So you're no longer in Florida, in Gainesville, you are affiliated somehow remotely.
That's correct. In my transition to retirement, I moved to Southern Utah and I work part-time and I spend a lot of time with the animals on the ranch.
Congratulations on your impending retirement. You are quite familiar with Mr. Frankowiak and the Otgen law firm, are you not?
Yes,
Sure. You've worked for them in the past?
yes. I think my recollection was I worked one other case for them.
And you've done over 900 depositions, close to 1,000 depositions, as an expert witness consultant, correct?
Yes,
And mostly were for defendant doctors, hospitals, and the state government, correct?
right. So in a criminal matter, as a state toxicologist, most of my deposition testimony and even my court testimony was for the state in the prosecution of a defendant.
Right. And you're coming into court to testify on behalf of the prosecution relative to typically the amount of cocaine ingested in a person who was driving an automobile, for instance.
Yes,
Right. And you charged $5,000 to come to court, correct?
I do, per day.
Per day. And an initial retainer of $2,500,
Yes, sir.
non-refundable. Correct?
Yes,
Yeah. And when I look at your report, it's dated February 10th of 2025. Is that an accurate date?
February 10th, 2025.
Right. So this lawsuit was filed 2 years and 2 months prior, or 2 years, approximately 2 years prior to your authoring of your report, right?
I don't know the timing of the complaint, but
Sure, of course not. Suffice it to say that you were not engaged to render an opinion in this case until some 2 years after it was ongoing.
yes, it seems that way.
It does seem that way.
Or, orienting to the unit?
Yes,
Okay. She was somewhere in the middle of that 10 or 12-week orientation period.
yes.
Okay. Do you recall what it was about Grace's condition that Mr. Schara believed that you were not being truthful?
I think the severity of how sick she was and the issues with her oxygenation.
Okay. At the beginning of each shift in the IC,
Computer set up and also the microphone.
Now, we met over Zoom a few months back, right?
Yes, we did.
Remember?
Yes,
I took your deposition and you were in Kanab, Utah, right?
yes.
On your horse ranch. In the
Donkey ranch.
Southern part of Utah. So you're no longer in Florida, in Gainesville, you are affiliated somehow remotely.
That's correct. In my transition to retirement, I moved to Southern Utah and I work part-time and I spend a lot of time with the animals on the ranch.
Congratulations on your impending retirement. You are quite familiar with Mr. Frankowiak and the Otgen law firm, are you not?
Yes,
Sure. You've worked for them in the past?
yes. I think my recollection is I worked one other case for them.
And you've done over 900 depositions, close to 1,000 depositions, as an expert witness consultant, correct?
Yes,
And mostly were for defendant doctors, hospitals, and the state government, correct?
right. So in a criminal matter, as a state toxicologist, most of my deposition testimony and even my court testimony was for the state in the prosecution of a defendant.
Right. And you're coming into court to testify on behalf of the prosecution relative to typically the amount of cocaine ingested in a person who was driving an automobile, for instance?
Yes,
Right. And you charged $5,000 to come to court, correct?
I do per day.
Per day. And an initial retainer of $2,500,
Yes, sir.
non-refundable. Correct?
Yes,
Yeah. And when I look at your report, it's dated February 10th of 2025. Is that an accurate date?
February 10th, 2025.
Right. So this lawsuit was filed 2 years and 2 months prior, or 2 years, approximately 2 years prior to your authoring of your report, right?
I don't know the timing of the complaint, but
Sure, of course not. Suffice it to say that you were not engaged to render an opinion in this case until some 2 years after it was ongoing.
yes, it seems that way.
It does seem that way. You have told us, thankfully, that you are not a medical doctor.
That's correct. I'm not a medical doctor.
You don't treat patients.
I don't treat patients.
You don't make clinical assessments or decisions relative to live patients.
Correct. In the moment, I don't.
Right. And you never have treated patients, correct?
Back in the day, I worked with an EMS volunteer ambulance, so I did treat patients then, and I worked in a hospital as well, but not as a physician.
As a physician, that's what I should have clarified it by tightening up that question.
Right.
You've never treated patients as a physician. You have, in fact, been the director of the University of Florida Racing Lab in testing thoroughbred horses and greyhounds, correct?
Yes,
Your opinion is based upon the medical records that you were provided, correct?
yes,
And in your report,
And things can change really quickly with sick patients.
As I understand it, as a layperson in an ICU, the reason someone is in an ICU is generally because they're fairly sick. Would that be
Yes.
an accurate statement?
Yes,
Okay. And those particularly sick people need to be monitored closely?
yes, very closely.
Okay. You mentioned an SpO2 device. What is an SpO2 device?
That's a sensor that,
Talk about having been retained by the Otgen law firm and asked to provide an expert opinion. You reviewed the following documents: the complaint, the second amended summons and complaint. But secondly, right under that line, the last line of your report dated February 10th, 2025, St. Elizabeth Hospital medical records 2 SEH 1-996 with index. Do you see that?
Yes,
Did you know that the total number of pages contained in the medical record was 1,137?
No.
Oh. That, if that were the case, then you obviously didn't receive all the medical records, did you?
that's possible.
Sure.
so that I can monitor.
Okay. If you recall, did he respond or how did he respond to you? If you can recall 4 years later.
I wrote down that,
Now, you've indicated to this jury, despite the fact you don't make clinical assessments, do not treat patients in the hospital, that you reviewed the medical records, and I would expect that you probably reviewed records relative to the event of October 7th. Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
Okay. And why don't you tell, ladies and gentlemen, jury, based upon your analysis, what happened on October 7th relative to the injection of or infusion of certain drugs?
I think you're asking me when she was given the initial dose of one. And
Of what?
of a dose of one,
Okay,
right? And she was overly sedated.
right.
And then the dose was dialed back to 0.7, if I'm not mistaken.
Just for clarification, what drug are we referring to?
The dexmedetomidine or
Also
Precedex.
known as Precedex.
Would that be the next note that you have in the record?
yes,
You note there that it looks like Mr. Schara was interfering with pump alarms.
yes.
Okay, and that's what we talked about a little earlier, kind of a pump alarm is one of those IV pumps for a medical Okay. Would she have been what's called a charge nurse in the ICU for the daytime shift on Sunday, October 10th?
Yes,
Was Allison Barcold's present on the unit at the time that your shift ended on the morning of October 10th?
yes.
What role, if any, was Ms. Barcold's playing that morning when we say charge nurse?
She's kind of in charge. I don't know how to explain it. Like she's the kind of organizing things and setting schedules and
Okay, so she's basically in charge of, kind of directing things, assigning people to patients, things like
Yes.
that? Okay. Did you talk to Nurse Barcoats on the morning of October 10th about your care of Grace Schara over the course of your overnight shift?
yes.
Why did you talk to Ms. Barcoats at the end of your shift that morning?
It's pretty routine to give updates to the charge nurse.
Okay. So in addition to giving updates to the oncoming nurse who's going to be taking over for your patient, you would also give an update to the charge nurse?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay. Do you recall what you communicated to Ms. Barcoats at that time?
Just concerns about the situations that I documented overnight and um, I think that's it.
Okay. Did you indicate to her, for example, your concerns about the request to turn off alarms in Grace's room?
Is that a term of art in your corner of the world?
I'm not sure how you define art, but it's a term that we use in pharmacology and toxicology. Physicians will use it as well.
So it doesn't mean that a person is like naive, like
Oh, no.
it means based upon their physiologic condition, the ability of the drug to impact that particular person?
That's right. We're not talking about behaviors,
No.
naivete. No, we're talking about the body's ability to respond or the body's response to a substance like dexmedetomidine.
Okay. So what you're saying is that initially Grace was naive, but later was able to tolerate the medication to such a degree that they needed to increase it to that level?
Because those starting doses will not be as effective later on. So
Right.
So you need to increase the dose to achieve a clinical effect, but also you have to consider the patient's status. I'm not here to testify on her health status, but that's also a consideration. Is it clinically necessary or needed?
Right. Specifically with respect to the Precedex, it was increased to 1.4. You don't have an opinion on whether Dr. Shokar or any other doctor decides it's appropriate to prescribe it again at 1.4?
That's a standard of practice question.
Okay, that's fine. We don't want you to testify outside of your area. Don't have an opinion about the standard of practice.
No, I'm not a standard of practice expert.
Right. Okay. Do you know what RAS score means?
I've heard of it, but no,
RASS?
no, I don't use it.
Okay. Would you agree with the following statement? lorazepam and morphine are both central nervous system depressants that could affect vital signs like heart rate, blood pressure, and respiratory rate. So when administered singly or in combination, the healthcare provider should monitor the patient's vital signs.
Yes,
You would agree that Precedex is a traditional central nervous system depressant, correct?
it is. Yes,
And it's obviously used to manage pain and treat anxiety. And it's also used to cause sedation, correct?
yes.
Did you find, based upon your review of the medical record, that there was an indication that Grace Schara was in pain prior to the infusion of Precedex?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
We want to talk a little bit about your opinion relative to additive versus synergistic, okay? Because I think there's some confusion here. You would agree that it's very difficult to measure synergistic effect in a patient, correct?
It's simply not possible.
It's just not possible. And why is that?
Well, we can't experiment and give people various doses and then see what the effect might be if it's additive or synergistic.
Right.
We also don't have tools or measures to actually assess if something is synergistic besides vital signs.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful about the loose use of the term synergism. And the reason why, really, I think we spoke about this in my deposition, is that it can be misleading.
Right.
We don't want to mislead the jury.
We don't want to mislead the jury. And everyone metabolizes drugs in different ways, correct?
We do. Some drugs are more variable than other drugs, but yes, we have different genetics, so we have different metabolic profiles.
Right. And we'd have to rely on signs and symptoms of the individual patient in order to understand how that particular patient is able to metabolize drugs either singly or in combination, correct?
Yes, it's the effect that I was referring to before.
Right. So Grace was unconscious on the 13th when she was given that massive dose of Precedex. I know you don't consider it a massive dose, but she was unconscious at that time. So therefore she didn't have any pain and she certainly didn't have anxiety, correct?
Correct.
If I could just have a minute, Judge, I may be, I know I'm very close to finished.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Right. You would agree with me, would you not, that none of these drugs are indicated for the treatment of COVID?
Directly, no, they're not.
Right.
They're not treating COVID.
And you would agree that the risk of another over sedation event never went away after 10/8, October 8th, correct?
Correct. That's why she's in the ICU and being monitored.
And on October 13th at around 6 p.m., since you looked at the vital signs and read the medical record, was it appropriate to continue Precedex at a rate of 1.4 when they couldn't even locate a pulse?
That's best practices.
Best practices outside your area.
Yes.
Okay. you're not stating here that the side effects of a drug or a combination of drugs could be ignored, correct?
They should never be ignored, even the
Right.
potential.
Right. And if there were listed exceptions to the typical administration of particular drugs, whether those are found in a package insert or in the PDR. Did you say the PDR is no longer in existence? You used to have one on your desk, I suspect, right?
It was a red book, yes.
A
no
red
more
book.
PDR.
Yeah. What if there was a second overdose? Would you then realize that the patient is in fact one of the exceptions listed in the package insert?
I don't have an answer to that. I'm not a physician.
Okay. If you learned that your child had suffered an allergic reaction to aspirin, would you give a second or third dose, even though the package insert states that the risk of an adverse reaction to aspirin is only 3%?
No.
Soon as Mr. Administrator finishes his questions, we'll take an afternoon break.
Can we have access to the TV screen? Thank you. Do you want to use that, the doc stick? You've got the pointer up there, doctor?
You just make a record of which exhibit this is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We did present it, gave it a number yesterday, but I don't have it on my.
I don't have it at my fingertips. We'll clear the record outside the presence of the jury.
Okay. I think it was 303 or 73. Okay.
On it a little bit. Correct.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Administrator.
As the title indicates, this is Grace's last day on October 13th, 2021. And what the graph indicates here is the administration of these various drugs. And the drugs are P for Precedex, L for lorazepam, M for morphine. Those are the drugs that were administered to her on that fateful day. And if we're looking at the far left side, you can see we've got midnight 0.8 Precedex. Right. And can you tell us what appears to be the administration at 6:02 a.m.? 0.9. So that's an increase in the Precedex. And I believe you testified for Mr. Francowiak, 7 a.m., less than an hour later, the Precedex is increased to 1.0. Right? Okay. And once again, would you consider that to be a nominal increase?
Nominal increase 1.9 less nominal.
Less nominal if you look at the starting point. Okay. And obviously, I would suspect that you would say the same thing about the dosages that are given her at both 7:30 a.m. and 7:54 a.m., that those are less nominal than when compared to 0.8 at midnight.
Yes.
Right. Because now we're almost twice the dosage that was given at midnight in less than 12. Right. Right, I understand. 1.6 would be twice if my math is correct. When you get to 1.4 at 10:48 a.m., you're almost twice, correct? Almost. And then you can see that at 11:25 a.m., that's our dosage about of the lorazepam. And as I understand lorazepam, it's another name for Ativan, or it is a anti-anxiety medication, correct?
Yes.
What is it in the medical record that would lead you to believe that she was suffering from anxiety at that time? You don't recall?
You can let them do that at the break. Would you like an opportunity to go back and look at it?
I'll leave that to Mr. Francoiac. I'm sure you recognized that in the record she was indicated to be somnolent in the afternoon hours of October 13th. Did you notice that? And based upon that somnolence, why would we be giving lorazepam? I see. And isn't the half-life of lorazepam 10 to 20 hours? Okay, so there's a range in terms of the half-life. Do you deal with half-life in your practice as a toxicologist? Sure. And so how would you define half-life? So basically what that means is that assuming she had that physiologically she would metabolize the drug in such a way that the half-life would be on the higher end. What that means is that that drug could be in her system for up to 20 hours. Completely eliminate, right, right. 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 Okay, you could have a seat, doctor. Thank you. Yeah. Do you recall noting in the medical record that Grace had no blood pressure at 6:09 p.m. on the 13th?
I don't know the exact time, but when she passed, she had no blood pressure.
Well, of course, she had no blood pressure when she passed. My question is, prior to that, if I said to you, I can represent the record in the case there was no blood pressure because there was an attempt to place an arterial line. Did you see that?
Yes.
Right. And the reason they failed to place the arterial line is because there was no blood pressure. right?
Often it's a problem if there's no blood pressure.
Sure, because what you're trying to do is extract arterial blood, right?
You need to find the vessel and insert the needle. Yes, it's helpful when you have blood pressure.
It's certainly helpful to have blood pressure because if you think about it as a hose, that means, the hose is completely filled up. Water's flowing through at a high pressure, right?
Yes.
Versus the venous side where it's returning. It's going to be very difficult to get anything out of it. Fair enough.
Yes.
So why would they give morphine 6 minutes after they recognized she had no blood pressure?
Ask them. You'll have to ask the physician.
Okay,
Sorry.
fair enough. Thank you. I don't think I have anything questions.
All right, so we'll do redirect after the break. So at this time, members of the jury, we'll take our afternoon break. We'll get you back in here whenever you're ready, which I understand will be about 20 minutes. You may step down, doctor, and you want to just be back here in 20 minutes? Okay, thank you. The jury is excused.
That, that's right.
Can't comment on this episode because I don't know about it.
I guess I'm surprised though. You would agree with me that that's a major event, that it happened, I guess, on the prior shift before you came on, right? So that tells me, did you look at the record just earlier in the day in terms of what medication she'd been given before you came on shift? I guess at 7 p.m.
I don't remember.
The other thing that I want to know, how many patients were you taking care of on your shift that night?
In the ICU, we take care of 2 patients.
2. So do you know you were taking care of 2 that night, or are you just guessing?
I believe I had a second patient, but I don't, that was.
I'll accept
remember.
that. Thank you. I also want to thank you for something else. You've actually set a record. This is the shortest cross-examination I think I've ever done in my life, but thank you very much for coming down here, and you have a good day.
Thank you.
Any follow-up?
Just one or two. I think you've testified to us before that you're very familiar with a medication called Precedex because you use it all the time.
Yes.
And when you were there caring for Grace overnight from the 8th to the 9th and the 9th to the 10th, you would have had access to the medical administration record so that you could see, whether there was anything, say, given to her in terms of Precedex.
Yes.
Okay. And would it surprise you to note that Precedex was running for this patient?
No, that would be normal.
Completely normal.
Yes.
Okay. And you understand titration to effect. You know what I'm talking when I say titration to effect? What does that mean as a nurse?
To increase the medication to get the effect that you are looking for. But the goal is to keep the medication at the lowest possible dose to get the effect
Okay.
that you need.
So if you had looked at the medical administration record, say at any time during your shift overnight from the 9th to the 10th, and had noticed that nurses earlier that day had titrated the medication to a level that they believed was appropriate to achieve the necessary therapeutic effect, that wouldn't cause any, it wouldn't even cause you to raise an eyebrow, would it?
No.
Because you, unlike anyone else in this room, work with this medication all the time, don't you?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Attorney Guzzi? Looking further. Any members of the jury have questions for this witness? There are none. Ms. Fisher, you may step down. Thanks for your testimony, and you are free to leave.
Okay.
So, yeah, you're good to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna be done for the day. Members of the jury, thanks for another good day, day 7 of the trial. It looks like the evidence part of the trials will hopefully be finished like next Tuesday. I spent a couple minutes talking with the attorneys and just to kind of fill you in. And then once that happens, there's instructions and closing arguments and then deliberation. So I still think like next Friday is a good ending date for you. So that following week, you know, you'll, a reminder not to do any independent research. Don't look into any issues. Not to discuss this case with anyone, including each other, okay? Thanks for your time today. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. The jurors are excused. All right, you may be seated. This is a hearing outside the presence of the jury. Exhibit 374 was introduced with Ms. Fisher. Any objection to receiving?
No objections.
Okay, so 374 is received. And then exhibits 543 through 550, with the exception of 548, are juror questions. 548 is a note from the juror asking if I'd let you guys know to just use the 3 terms instead of the other terms. Any objection of those exhibits being received? Okay. Okay.
I guess to be clear, we're using Precedex, Razapam.
I think those are the 3 that they prefer. And if you read their questions, those are the 3 that they're referring to. So I think it's consistent. I don't know if they talked.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, one of my experts prefers to call it dexmedetomidine, but I will, so if he slips,
Well, which one is that?
Precedex.
I mean, you just, I mean, if you can explain it to the jury that this witness is going to call it that so they can, I've been doing P, M, and L on my notes, you know, so I didn't have to print it out every time. And I don't know what they're doing, but you can see originally in the trial, they weren't spelling it right on their questions. And now they're spelling it right, which means they're following your slides or the exhibits. But I only read it to you because I thought if I were in your chair, I'd want to not confuse the jury. And I think the question said it's getting confusing. So I think they're doing it in a way to try to get us to present in a way that is easy for them to understand.
No, I appreciate that.
Okay. I want to just make one correction, and I think I'm good for the day. This morning, we were talking about the battery, and I think I misspoke, so I just want to correct it. It doesn't change any of the stuff that I said. But I had indicated that Mr. Schara testified that he originally consented to medications. When I went back throughout the day today and looked at his testimony, I think it's fair to maybe correct what I said. He testified that he did not consent to lorazepam or Precedex medications on either October 7th or October 8th, that he consented to the restraints. He also mentioned that he wasn't asked about either of those medications. However, when he was cross-examined, exhibit number 360, page 3, 3rd paragraph, was the letter that he had written. And in that letter, which he was cross-examined and acknowledged, it wrote, "Once she broke out of the restraints, I gave permission to sedate her for the specific purpose of getting oxygen support." The next sentence had to talk about like it lasted 4 hours. So I think that's what I was referencing when I said there was consent for that medication, just so there's no confusion. I'm not saying it now to encourage argument. I just wanted to further explain, because I did make that statement on the record this morning. But Mr. Mendenhall, you wanted to say something?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's been a long day for you guys. I know you got to get ready for tomorrow. So is there anything else that we need to do tonight?
No, Your Honor.
You said no, Mr. Guzzi?
I said mercifully no.
Okay, yeah, I want to be respectful for you guys getting ready. So what's the plan for tomorrow? Or have you already given the names to the other side, defense?
If you don't mind, just further on.
Sure.
The first witness is going to be Dr. Aaron Binstock. He's a radiologist. I'm going to have him here as soon as we can in the morning, and he'll be here by.
Okay, thanks.
I'm trying to arrange for him to be able to use, because he's going to be talking about a CT scan, and he gets to use his special reader software, so he's going to need to use his laptop from the witness stand. That's permissible. So I just need to get here and kind of figure out how to get that all set up tech-wise. So we're done with that. Should be ready to go.
Okay, and I know Mandy's good at it, so
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about it already. We have a game plan.
and what time are you gonna meet then? 7:30?
I'll be here for
What time has the front doors been open?
7:30.
Okay,
It does make it a little tight this morning. Ready to go, but
yeah, I mean, if you want to get in early, I can let you in. I'm always in the back. That's a different question, but if you want me to meet you down there earlier, I can,
at the front, in the front.
yeah, I can be down there.
Even just an extra 10 minutes, so we make this work, so we're ready to go. in the
Okay.
jury's here.
So if we're there at 7:20, or-
7:20 front door, I'll be there.
good with everybody? Okay,
Correct. We've already discussed the issue of the witness utilizing the laptop, and based upon his specialty, and the fact that he needs to use it to display CT slides, we're fine with that.
good, thanks.
Yeah, we'll plug in.
We've got an agreement.
And then is he gonna be all day?
No, I actually don't think he'll be, I mean, he's not gonna be 4 hours. I mean, a couple hours depending on how long they cross him, but he's basically just gonna be running through the images and giving us impressions, so we've got some exhibits to introduce. I think I might be done with them in 45 minutes.
And then who will be after that?
I believe we have Dr. Fisk, an infectious disease doctor lined up. Right now, I don't think we have anybody else lined up. Just two experts seems reasonably ambitious, but I guess I don't know if we're gonna have any extra time.
Well, let's plan like you do, because if you're only gonna take 45 minutes with your expert, Mr. Guzzi, we're gonna
Yeah.
probably have time. So is Allison Barcoats the third?
Yeah, I can see if I can try to have, I mean, I had Allison kind of sitting around all day and she didn't get to go today, so I can try to have her back and we can try to get her on in the afternoon. If we have time, I'm trying to work around people's schedules and it's very difficult to yank them around and tell them to spend multiple days sitting around the courthouse, but there's really not much.
Yeah, and I feel bad about that, but I don't want to send them home at 1 in the afternoon on a Wednesday.
I know.
Okay,
know.
So I think we need to fill in the time and.
Get somebody who will be available in case there's time in the late afternoon.
Okay, and then I'd like you to notify them tonight on who those people are. You know, so I understand Dr. Binstock, Dr. Fisk, Allison Barkholtz, and then if there's another one, you should make sure they know about it.
Right. I don't think there's any chance that we get more than that. If
Okay.
I will let them, whoever I have for tomorrow, I will let them know tonight.
I would respectfully disagree with Mr. Frankowiak regarding the ambitious nature of both Dr. Binstock and Fisk. As Mr. Guzzi pointed out, Dr. Binstock's going to be relatively short on direct, and I'm going to do the cross, and I think it's equally short. So I would think it's not all that ambitious that we get through both of those in the morning session. Does that seem reasonable?
I'm not doing the direct Dr. Fish, so I don't know. But I mean, all I can tell you is that by nature, I tend to be a little bit quicker on my directs.
So the only thing I just want is, I think notice needs to be given, so let them know of that fourth person so they can get ready for 4. And if you only happen to call 3 of them tomorrow, then that's okay. I think that's reasonable to get ready for 4. Anything else tonight?
I do have a question about Dr. Fisk. Is he going to be using any special equipment or is he just going to be using the discovery documents?
He's just gonna be using documents. He's not gonna need any special equipment.
And then is it gonna be just you tomorrow, or is your witness gonna be here at 7:20?
Using the discovery documents.
He's just gonna be using documents. He's not gonna need any special equipment.
And then is it gonna be just you tomorrow, or is your witness gonna be here at 7:20? Mr. Guzzi?
I'll have him here at 7, I can have him here at 7:20. Because I want him to plug in, make sure everything works with the software and everything like that. But we have a backup plan if it doesn't, but it would be helpful for the jurors to see that.
Okay. Andy, is that something you're able to do? You wanna do that? Okay, I don't wanna be accused of meeting with one lawyer without the other.
We
and then
waive
we're
any ex
talking.
parte.
Okay,
We waive any ex parte contact.
okay, all right, good.
I promise the only thing I'll ask about is first give.
They lost yesterday, I saw.
I know they did.
I just want to be
Well,
clear.
I mean, I've heard, I haven't watched, we're actually at a break talking about the whole situation in California, like what situation?
Yeah. I just want to be clear. What time are we supposed to be here? 8 o'clock?
Yeah.
Why don't we try to go on like at 7:50 again in case something comes up? It's sort of like we were this morning, 7:55.
All right. We'll hustle up and get here. Thank you.
Okay, good, thanks.